Hey y'all, Angel Audio here. I'm gonna talk about a murder puppet. What? No, not the puppet, not just the puppet. I want to talk about the inspiration for the Saw movies, which involves a puppet. I've been interested in puppets recently. I've been watching a lot of Muppet things. Eugene had a birthday with puppets recently. I watched a lot of puppet history. Puppets are very interesting. I kind of want to make one, but also, I don't have the time or the resources to make a puppet right now. Other than, like, a sock puppet. I could do a sock puppet, maybe a bag puppet. Oh my gosh, I could have my kids make a little bag puppet. Not for this week. That's not the theme this week, but at some point. And then they can annoy their parents. Anyway, so I want to talk about some of the inspiration for the Saw movie, because I think they're, like, a very important part of the horror movie, like, the whole, like, genre as a whole. Everybody always is I think everyone's watched at least one Saw movie. I think they came out with, like, a newer movie called Jigsaw that had, like, Chris Rock in it, which I didn't know he did horror, but, you know, at least he's not getting slapped by Will Smith. So, I don't know. I know I've seen, like, some stuff about what the Saw movies were based off of, but I just found this little report on it, the Saw, the true story that inspired the horror movie, and I'm sure there's, like, it takes inspiration from a lot of stuff, you know, but this is just something I found I thought I'd share. Get this little murder puppet out of my system, because I want to start doing, like, videos over, like, creepypastas and SCPs soon, because they're nostalgic for me, and I used to, like, dedicate my life to them without being murdery. I did not murder, but there was so many of those little pictures on my iPad, and so many stories. I was really dedicated, man. It was a problem. I was for sure thought that, like, Slender Man was gonna come out of the woods around my house. I, like, would stare out that window and be like, I saw a little movement. There he is. And he wasn't. He wasn't. So, we're good. I survived. I didn't murder anyone. But I'll tell you about it later. It's all good. Anyway, Saw. Okay, so Saw was partially inspired by true stories and people, from hospital visits to serial ticklers. That's weird. There's some fitting weirdness behind the horror movie. Of all the ways to describe the Saw horror movies, inspired by a true story probably isn't one that commonly crosses viewers' considerations. I feel like that's all horror movies and stuff, though. Almost everything is like, well, actually, did you know it was based off this little thing? What is she staring at? Oh, okay, never mind. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's always gonna be some, oh, well, actually, this person saw this person get murdered, and so they made a horror movie out of it. Something's always based off something, you know? There's, like, so much out there now that I feel like there's very few actually, like, authentically original ideas. And I feel like I'm a pretty creative person, but I saw also sometimes I'm just like, that's obviously something else that you just made your thing. Anyway. However, the basis of the first film is loosely based on a couple of actual events and people that inspired the creators of this long-running horror franchise. So, is Saw based on a true story? Like John Kramer, Jigsaw, the Saw franchise didn't fade away as quickly as some might have expected. Factoring in the latest installment, Spiral, that's what it was called. There's a total of 9 Saw films. This makes 10 if factoring in James Wan's short film that started it all. Needless to say, the Saw movie series is a successful franchise that is likely to continue, although some think Saw 7, the final chapter, should have been the last film. I mean, it does say final chapter in it, so understandable. Regardless, the franchise has been a turning point, not only for the horror genre, but also for Lee Whannell and James Wan, who have gone on to have incredible careers in horror and beyond. I mean, yeah, you do Saw, you kind of get a big name in horror movies. Related, a Spiral sequel can work, but only if Chris Rock is the villain. Oh, we're gonna make... I didn't even know Chris Rock was into a horror movie in the first place. So now he's a villain. That's great. While all films in the franchise have been relatively popular and successful, Saw 3 is number one in terms of earnings. It managed to bring in nearly $165 million globally, which is impressive for such a brutal film. Though the concept is reasonably far-fetched by most people's standards, the original inspiration for Wannell and Wan's Saw franchise came from ideas pulled out of real-life stories. So here's the real events that had Saw based on the story inspiration at first. Jesus Christ, there's so many words that for some reason I can't say. Okay. Lee Winehouse, writer for the first 3 horror films in the Saw franchise, and Adam in the first film, got the idea for John Kramer's character for a real-life experience at the hospital. In an interview in the AV Club, Winehouse says that when he was 24, he began to have severe migraines. Fearful of something serious like a brain tumor, he eventually went to the hospital to get a series of tests performed, including an MRI. Then, the initial idea for Jigsaw, the Saw movie's main villain, came to him. He thought of a psychopath that was told they were going to die of terminal illness. Instead of a doctor telling you have a year to live, make the best of it, this guy would put people in a situation to say, you have 10 minutes to live. How are you going to spend those 10 minutes? Are you going to get out of it? Zepp, a character in the Saw movie franchise responsible for carrying out Jigsaw's kidnappings, was inspired by a bizarre true story that James Wan read when he was younger. So the question is Saw based on a true story? Can be answered sort of. It centered on the man who was breaking into people's houses at night, not to steal, but to tickle their feet. Wan doesn't give specific locations or dates about the particular case, but oddly enough, there was more than a few real-life serial tickler crime cases out there. The man was eventually caught, and during interrogation, he told police that he was being forced to do it by someone else. He later revealed that he was sent a jigsaw puzzle piece in the mail, instructing him to commit the acts. I mean, that seems very weird and concerning. I don't know why someone would force someone else to do that. I don't know. I mean, at least it wasn't like someone getting forced to murder, which actually, no, there was. I don't know if it talks about it later in this thing, but I know that there was like the thing that they say Saw was sort of based off, where the guy had like the thing strapped to him. He's like, I was forced to go around all these things and checkpoints or it's gonna blow up. But anyway, like the other Saw movies, Spiral isn't 100% based on a true story. However, it similarly draws many of its themes, especially socially conscious ones, from real life. The Saw installment ends with the revelation that Zeke, Chris Rock's partner, William, Max McGonagall, has been the Jigsaw copycat all along. He sees a string of violence as fitting vengeance for police officers who abuse their power. Police unjustly killed his father. And Zeke's father also ends up being killed by a SWAT team after being framed by William to look as if he's holding a gun in a tense moment. With the social climate in the United States being what it's been in the last few years, it's easy to see how some of the major events and movements related to police brutality helped inspire part of Spiral. Director Darren Lynn Bousman is quoted by MSN as saying about the subject matter and is connected to the Spiral story timeline in May 2021. I mean, sadly, the reality is this police brutality has been an issue long before the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. This has been going on for years and years and years, but we always want to say something within the Saw movies, even though they're buried in blood and violence and guts and gore. There's always a message to them, and that started with James Wan's original and went through mine. We always wanted to say something more. I think that's why the Saw films have persevered while so many other franchises have not. That's true. While the earlier movies have inspired the question of Saw's possible basis in real events, the later films of the franchise are too outlandish to warrant it. It's worth noting that pro-life horror director James Wan only helmed the first Saw movie and co-wrote Saw 3. He only stayed on as producer for the rest of the franchise. While this did give him some creative control over the sequels, it is not quite the same as being the director's chair. This could be one of the key reasons the franchise lost its overarching meaning and slowly devolved. At the beginning of the series, the movies were about a psychopath with terminal illness, abducting unwitting victims to take part in an experiment to determine what they would do if they knew they had a little time left to live. After Saw 3, the concept started to fall off into the territory of seeing how much gore can be put into 90 minutes, especially with Jigsaw's replacement in later installments. Some of the traps became inescapable, completely obliterating the original underlying meaning that kept the concept afloat. The kills became about gore and torture, which did provide some of the shocking on-screen murders that made the franchise so infamous, but robbed the kills of any meaning or tension, detaching the story from its overall theme and making the Saw franchise into something totally different and way worse. Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, I don't know. Shh. Leave her alone, that is mean. So, I don't know. I knew all of them were, like, supposed to be, like, oh, well, you were a dick to this person, so now we're gonna put you in, like, an extreme version of that or something, or we're gonna put you in, like, these terrible, like, traps that, like, snap open your jaw. There was the, what was it? Like, the revolving, their coworkers or something. Like, they had to choose, like, who got shot and who didn't thing. There was the barbed wire one. I remember the one, I think that was, like, the main thing of one of the movies. It's been a while since I watched the Saw movies, but, like, don't leave me like that. That, they were both chained in a bathroom at the beginning of the movie. You see, like, the key, like, go down the bathtub because he unplugged it to get out, and I'm like, wow, you immediately screwed yourself. So, like, one of them chopped off their foot and then ended up bleeding out. What? Is that the one that I saw before? Because I know there was, like, an actual, like, story where these people were either, like, based off of Saw, or, like, Saw was based off of it. Let's see if this one has anything. They weren't based off some topic. Twisted pictures. Why is my door wide open now? Oh, hey, okay, so then maybe that one works. I don't know. We'll try their one. I'm gonna shut my door, though, because they left it open to let all the dogs out. That's great. It's not like she knows. It's not like I would prefer silence, and it's not like I have a bunny in here that needs to not leave. Okay. Here's another one that I think maybe talks more about the story that I actually heard that I thought they said was sort of like Saw. Anyway, the Saw movie franchise is based upon a real story. The Saw horror franchise is notorious for its sick and twisted death scenes. The Saw franchise takes advantage of a very real fear of assault, sadistic torture, and body horror. Given torture is a fairly realistic fear, free of supernatural elements, it is more logical that there could be a real-life killer like John Kramer. After all, many of the traps or similar mockeries could be devised from simple components and parts available online and from hardware stores. Who could possibly come up with such sadistic torture strategies like those employed by Jigsaw if they weren't basing it off some type of real-life event? Twisted Pictures is responsible, along with James Wan and other directors and writers, for coming up with deranged storyline that is the Saw franchise. That said, there is one really strong media push to want a Jigsaw killer, probably due to the movie themselves. In 2009, Jeffrey Howell was murdered by Stephen Marshall and Sarah Bush. Howe was dismembered completely, and the body parts were found scattered throughout multiple places. Because of many body parts turning up, the media referred to Howe as a Jigsaw man, and later referred to Marshall as a Jigsaw killer. Truly, Howe was Marshall's only victim, and Marshall was nowhere near as smart as John Kramer. In fact, Marshall was a bodybuilder who killed Howe, his friend, in order to steal his food and housing benefits. Hardly an intelligent move. Ultimately, there is no real-life jigsaw killer. However, there are still several notable murders and deaths which actually do resemble saw-like devices. It is most certainly reasonable to assume a fair amount of murders and conspiring to be murders who draw inspiration from jigsaw, saw, and traps from the movies. Notable murders, deaths, and plots that resemble saw movie deaths. Real death like Saw number 1, the death of Brian Douglas Wells. A device was attached to Brian Wells' chest, and he was ordered to rob a bank. The device armed and exploded, leaving a huge baseball-sized hole in his chest, instantly killing him. Real death like Saw 2, the death of Richard Hamilton. In 2013, a murderer was spawned who copied a scene out of the Saw film, treated by slicing through the victim Richard Hamilton's spine until he revealed his ATM card's PIN number. The murderer was Matthew Tinlin, who owned a copy of the very Saw film with the torture scene itself. Turns out that he only wanted 240 pounds, specifically to spend the money on crack cocaine. That's so stupid. Real death like Saw number 3, a triad murder. Although the murder occurred before the time of Saw, the famous Hello Kitty murder in Hong Kong in 1999 of the world shocked in a similar sense of sadistic. A woman was murdered, decapitated, and her head stuffed in a Hello Kitty doll as an intimidation tactic. I know about this one. I know I've seen a picture of the Hello Kitty doll. You know, it's so weird that, like, they show us crime scene photos, but not, like, the actual, like, crime scene photos. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, I want to see, like, body parts and everywhere, but, like, you see that Hello Kitty doll, and you know there's a head in there, but you don't see the head. You just see a super dirty doll. And it's very weird. Like, you know there's something wrong with it, but you haven't, like, actually seen it. Anyway. Okay, number 4. Canadian serial killer Cody Lajabakoff. I don't know how to say words. Cody was a fairly young serial killer and decided to murder those he felt sorry for, similar to John Kramer's reasoning for trapping and murdering his victims in the Saw franchise. I don't know if John Kramer felt sorry for people. It was more of, like, he was showing people that they were the problem. I don't know. Close Call Saw-inspired plot number 5, recreating the movie. 2 teenage boys, 15 and 14 years old, were turned in by one of their mothers after she heard them discussing a plot to create the Saw movies by kidnapping a police officer and 2 girls around their age, who they believe deserved the Saw treatment. They had even begun collecting the necessary supplies, including camcorders for documenting their recreation. See, this is almost like the Slender Man thing, where those girls were like, I'm gonna kill someone for Slender Man, and I mean, like, sometimes people take it, like, way too far. Like, it's cool to have, like, some creepy shit in your life, you know? I think everybody needs some creepy stuff in their life, but there's no reason to, like, actually murder somebody. Like, I feel like something in you changes whenever you actually murder a person. These people are just like, you know what, I'm just gonna kill him. I saw a movie, so... Close Call, Saw-inspired plot number 6, saw, like, phone calls. 2 13-year-old girls from Tennessee got into a little trouble after harassing an older woman with a jigsaw-like voice, leaving messages that insinuated a game had begun in her home. The voice messages exclaimed her friend was trapped, hidden in fact, in her home, and that she needed to risk dying of toxic gas poison while trying to find her friend, or immediately save herself by escaping the home. The poor woman instead had a stroke and was rushed to the hospital. Wow, those are terrible little girls. What is wrong with kids? Honestly. Although many people are inspired by movies, and there are most certainly have been some notable murders that could have been inspired by Saw's fictional killer Jigsaw, there was no real Jigsaw killer. The Saw franchise, no matter how creative, is not based upon a true story. Still, James Wan, Twisted Pictures, and everyone else involved in the production of Saw movies deserves a standing ovation for the originality within a wildly saturated industry that is the horror genre. Yeah, there seriously are, like, a ton of horror movies, but I think, I think the death of Brian Douglas Wells was the one that I thought was inspired by. Yeah. Maybe I can look it up. Maybe we can look it up and we can talk about it. Because Not inspired by, okay. No, if it'll ever let me do the things I want. Okay. Brian Douglas Wells. We're just on an adventure together. This is a very messy video because I had to get up and shut the door and all that, and also we're just jumping around trying to find the thing that I think I know what we're talking about. Murder Brian Wells. Simple Brian Wells. Case of Brian Douglas Wells. We're going on an adventure. Still good chat. Good time. Eventually, if it'll load. Okay. The case of Brian Douglas Wells in America's most bizarre bank robbery. Oh, yeah. So this is what I thought about. Okay. On 28th of August, 2003, one of the most bizarre crimes ever seen in America unfolded in Erie, Pennsylvania. Most unusual heist. Events began when 46-year-old pizza delivery man Brian Douglas Wells calmly walked into a PNC bank in town and demanded that they give him $250,000. But what is particularly unusual about this robbery is that Wells, who is also carrying what appears to be a cane, has a large bulge underneath his t-shirt. He hands a note to the cashier demanding the money and states that the device around his neck is in fact a bomb. But the cashier tells him that they don't have the amount of money at the bank. She instead hands him the bag containing just $8,702. Wells seems satisfied with this and leaves the bank, gets into his car and drives off. Everything about him is cool, calm, and collected. Just a few minutes later, he stops, gets out of his car, collects what appears to be another note from underneath a rock. But soon the Pennsylvania State Troopers are on to him and surround the car. They force Wells to the ground and proceed to handcuff his hands behind his back. A peculiar tale of the tragic end. Here the story takes an even more extraordinary twist. Wells begins to relate a bizarre tale to the police. Wells, who has no criminal record, tells the police that that he has been forced to carry out the robbery after being taken hostage by 3 black men whilst delivering a pizza to an address just a few miles from the Mamma Mia pizzeria where he worked. He says that they held him at gunpoint, attached the bomb around his neck, and then instructed him to carry out the robbery. If he succeeds, he lives, but if he fails, the bomb will explode after 15 minutes. But something about this man doesn't quite add up. Despite his insistence to the officers that the bomb will explode at any moment, Wells seems completely at ease with the situation. Is the bomb actually real? Wells, it seems, may think that the bomb is a fake, but the truth is about to be revealed. At 3:18 p.m., the device starts to emit a loud beeping noise, which grows steadily faster. It is at this point that Wells, for the first time, appears to become agitated. Just seconds later, the device explodes, killing Wells. Might have been a bit real then. The case unravels. Later, the FBI find a set of complex notes in Wells' cars, which reveals that he had just 55 minutes to complete a series of tasks, including the bank robbery, before the device would explode upon the completion of each task. Wells was to be given more time before the device exploded. But what really happened here? This long and complicated story involves an even longer investigation, but ultimately, Wells was, it transpires, in on the robbery. Wells, together with Kenneth Barnes, William Rothstein, and Marjorie Dell Armstrong, had plotted to rob the bank. The purpose of the plot was to raise enough money to pay Barnes to kill Dell Armstrong's father, so she could claim her inheritance. Barnes had drawn Wells into the plot, a man who he knew through prostitute Dell Armstrong. However, Wells' personal motives for his involvement are still unknown. Rothstein died of natural causes in 2003, and as such was never charged. In September 2008, Barnes was sentenced to 45 years in prison for conspiring to rob a bank and for aiding in the plotting and execution of the crime. Due to bipolar disorder and a ruling that she was unfit to stand trial, Dell Armstrong has not sat down until February 2011. She was sentenced to life plus 30 years for armed bank robbery and using a destructive device in a crime. See, that's the one that I thought was, inspired by Saw. Because of the neck thing. I think that's what the crime story things I saw were like, oh yeah, because of the collar. It's for sure Saw. I'm like, yeah. There was really no, life lesson to be learned by the collar. It was just a torture device, you know, but I mean, I think it was interesting. I think Sawn itself is interesting, and all of the, like, themes and stuff that they go into about, like, being a better person and trying to use the time that you got to, like, fix the situation you're in, even though the situations they put them in are not great situations. Kind of hard to fix after that one, but, you know. Anyways, I think that's a good place to sort of end it on. Hopefully, I will have more videos out soon. I hope you guys like this one. This one was kind of all over the place, but that's fine. Sometimes you have all over the place videos. It makes it feel more personal, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, have a good day, night, whatever. Be nice to everybody. Don't do anything bad. Don't kill anybody. Don't get killed. All that other stuff. Bye.